Today I'm answering questions as related to my ResearchGate files and my teaching files associated with SARS-CoV2, COVID-19, etc. So this is all on my ResearchGate entitled Gary Ordog, MD. And we're out here on Addington Slough, it's called. And it's opposite Pitt Lake, and there's a dike in between, but the water exchanges between Addington Slough and the Pitt River and Pitt Lake. So Addington Slough eventually drains into the Pitt Lake and the Pitt River. Anyway, my series of questions was based on Emergency Medicine 304 when I taught at UCLA many years ago. This is a continuation of that, as I taught that for many years, was in charge of it for some years as residency director and interim chairman and vice chairman of the Department of Emergency Medicine at the County of Los Angeles and at Martin Luther King Hospital, which was the affiliate of UCLA, and we also taught the UCLA students. So anyway, the first question was teaching points. Number one, SARS-CoV2, COVID-19 terminology. So SARS stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, and this is the second one, and it's caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, which is the coronavirus. And this is the second one. The first one was several years ago. There may have been a couple of them if you consider MERS as well, which was the Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome. And COVID-19 stands for coronavirus ID'd in 2019. And that's the current one that we have. The current pandemic is now into 2021, but started mainly in 2020, but was probably with index cases, that is the first cases, in 2019. So that's why it was first actually identified in China in 2019. It is a pandemic because it is basically a disaster that's turned into a catastrophe affecting potentially everyone in the world. Question number three is review all previous pandemics. So you can do this by looking and Googling it online, but there have been many pandemics, possibly 100 that I could count if you look them up. I won't repeat all of them, but obviously everyone remembers the 1918 pandemic with the influenza virus, which was a novel virus, new to the population, and so killed many, many people. And it was the H1N1 that was the designation given to it. This was the first one seen. There have also been pandemics in yellow fever, which is now treatable. There was pandemics in hepatitis, various types, A, B, C. There's even designations D and E. There's also a polio pandemic, which before I was born actually affected many, many people and killed many, many people, put many, many people on respirators, the artificial lung. Sorry about the boat going by. It is a navigable river, and someone's going up the river and then up the lake. So I have to watch for bears here. There's a prime place for bears. So let me know if you see any coming up behind me. I can't see that well in the monitor. Okay, number 5, review the death curve for 1918 to 1920. And this had various spikes. It had 3 main spikes over the 2 years. That was the H1N1 flu, and had a significantly high mortality rate that potentially killed perhaps 100 million people on the planet. Now at that time the population of the Earth obviously was much less, so had a higher mortality rate than COVID-19 presently. But without vaccination, it would be potential that COVID-19 could catch up. Okay, 2020 estimate mortality without a vaccine. The mortality rate is usually a percentage. So let's say if it's 5% mortality, then 5% of the people who contact the illness would have a mortality rate. So it's COVID-19 is probably more like 1%. So 1% of the Earth's population, if there are 6 to 8 billion people, that's still quite a few people. Okay, the next question relates to herd immunity, natural versus vaccination. So herd immunity, natural, occurs when the population actually contracts the virus, becomes ill, or develops immunity through infection of the virus. Now there are many cases that are asymptomatic, so those would be included as well, but the population would have to develop some immunity to infection by the virus, whether symptomatic or asymptomatic. And that would prevent them for some time from developing a viral infection from COVID-19 again. Now obviously the virus is mutating and some people are getting reinfected. Also we're finding that the immunity does not last for life. As with some viruses, it may only be present for up to a year. We don't know yet because it hasn't been that long since the pandemic started. Now vaccination immunity, herd immunity, that is giving the vaccination to develop antibodies to help prevent infection from the COVID-19, which the actual virus is the SARSCOV2 virus. And again, we don't know how long that lasts. It's at least several months. The vaccine may have to be repeated. But that is another way. That's called vaccination herd immunity versus the natural, which is actually catching the virus. And I will stop here for a second.